Kimmy.
Hi.
It's so great to have you here.
So good to be here. It's been so long.
It's been so long. The last time I saw you, we were in Australia.
We were both facilitating at the Wanderlust event.
Yes.
And it was your first time in Australia.
Yes.
And I sort of knew a little bit about your work before I saw you, and I was there, and I spotted you sitting on a bench, and I thought, I need to go over and just say hello to Koya. So, and here we are now, all these years later.
All these years later. And one that I loved about you is, of course, I know you hear it a lot, but your accent. I love it. I love the Australian accent.
Yeah, well, see, that's interesting because I was born in England. I was in England until, for most of my life. I'm about to I've been in Australia for long, but I've been in Australia now for 22 years. Oh, wow. So Australians can hear the English accent and the English can hear my Australian.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you as an American are saying that you can hear the Australian.
Yeah. And I love the mix too, because it is a beautiful mix. Yeah.
I'll take that.
I also love that you just you go right in. Like, we were just talking. We almost stop. We have to start rolling first. Because I love how you just go right in and you really take the world. I feel like you take the world with both hands and say, let's go. Yeah. And so one thing that I want to talk about is your acronym for power. When I see you, when I hear you, even when I spoke to you for the first time, I could feel your power. And not this overwhelming, I need tension to be on me power, but this subtle, casual, I'm just kind of powerful. Yeah. And so can you talk to us about, what power in general means to you and then kind of break down your philosophy?
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to speak about what power did mean to me, which was something that I wanted no part of. Yeah. So for me, growing up in the UK, I was generally the only black person in the spaces that I found myself in, and power to me did not look like me in any way. So it was either feminine power, which was white, blonde beauty, or it was male, white power. Right. So that had nothing to do with me. Yeah. And the only experience that I had with that was one of negativity. That never made me feel good about myself. So I was, I think, like many women, regardless of culture or ethnicity, was like, power, I have no interest in it at all. But then what I started to realize, especially when I started doing my work as an executive coach and running retreats for women, I started to see that there are many ways that we as women in particular give our power away. And sometimes that is the smartest thing to do. I will always say that. We have all found ourselves in situations where actually giving our power away was the smartest and safest thing to do at that time. There are also times when we take power, and then what is it to then have a sense of power that is regenerative? So I felt very, very blessed, and I did the work. I'm not just going to say it was luck, but I felt very blessed to be chosen to be one of Brené Brown's facilitators for her Dare to Lead work. So I travelled to Texas, went and trained with Dr. Brené Brown, and so then she talks about power in terms of power over. So for me, that's what I grew up with, this idea that power is something that someone does to you, which leaves you powerless. Right. So she talks about power to and power with. So it's a form of power that is regenerative. If I have power, if I genuinely have a sense of power within myself, I have no interest in taking your power from you. In fact, all I want to do is elevate, honour and acknowledge the power that you have, and together we have power. Right. So because, I'm an author, I love words. So I was like, what is this word power? What does it actually mean? And I know there are many other dictionaries in the world, but I am English. I will always go to the Oxford Dictionary. And the definition of power is the ability or capacity to do something in a particular way. So I was like, wow, that word's been co-opted. If that's actually what power is, the ability and capacity to do something in a particular way, why have so many of us felt powerless? And how do we gain a sense of power, especially for those of us that do not thrive within particular structures? Where does that power come from? And I don't call it personal power. I don't call it feminine power. I just want us to own the word power because it's the capacity to do something in a particular way. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So then as I was writing, I remember one night, I love the magic of the universe, and I'd sort of written on a Post-it note. I knew how I wanted to redefine power was in the word, but I didn't know how. Right. So I had done a meditation, going to sleep, and I thought, just write the question, what's in the word? Something like that I think I wrote, put it down, and as I know, you can wake up and it's right there. Right. And it was literally, I did my morning meditation, and it literally was there, presence, ownership, wisdom, equality, responsibility. I was like,
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we're good to go.
Yeah. And I want to break it down. So especially because your life has been so full, you know, and really starting with presence, you know, and growing up in your body as you. What does presence mean to you, and how has that evolved over your lifetime?
I think what I'd like to do is, like, if it works for you, to speak through what each of them mean, and then to go deeper with each of them.
I
just
love
so
it.
that the listener,
I love it.
So presence is the ability to look at what is working in our lives and what is not working in our lives. And our ability or inability to be present has a massive impact in how we feel about ourselves in the world and how we experience the world.
Right.
Ownership is about taking ownership of our stories, full ownership of our stories, our light and our shadow, the stories we have lived, the ones we have witnessed, the ones we have been told, and let's be honest, the ones we've just made up. You know, for whatever reason, you know, just made them up.
Hey,
you know?
we get creative.
This is my story. Yeah, exactly. So how do we take them and integrate all of them? Because I know that when we integrate our full stories, that's where we stand in our power. Wisdom is around listening to that innate inner voice that all of us have, and yet that inner voice is trained out of us so often. And it seems like a, you know, sort of a paradox that I as a coach would say, don't trust anyone else with your wisdom. But for the work that I do as a coach, I never give advice. That's not my job. My job is to create a safe place for people to work out their own answers. So wisdom is about creating, which kind of goes back to presence, but creating that space to listen to what you are telling yourself without the external telling you who you should be or what you should do. Like that, yeah? Okay, right. Equality, and I'm sure many of your listeners and yourself, you know, we contribute to global inequality in the ways that we can, however that resonates with us. But in the book, I talk a lot about where are the times that we find ourselves unequal or unequal to the people that we find ourselves around. And where I get curious about as a coach is, it's not only knowing I feel powerless or I feel less than with this person or in this space, I get curious about what do you do when you feel unequal, because generally we come out of our bodies, we fragment, we people please, we do all of these other things.
Right.
So then it's like we need to know what we do in the spaces where we feel unequal. And then finally, which is actually my favorite part of the power principles, is responsibility. You know, that I believe that we are the ones that have to be in charge of our lives. It doesn't mean we don't have help. It doesn't mean we don't ask for support. It doesn't mean there's not room for growth or any of those things. But this idea of actually being the driver's seat, being the captain of one's own ship, and that if we take responsibility for our lives, then we take responsibility for our power. And once we take responsibility for our power, we can do with it whatever we want.
Right.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. I feel like when we look at life and we look at the word power, a lot of people will see power as whoever has the most money, whoever has the most assets, and whoever has the most maybe following, you know, and look at all these superficial things. But I love the way you've broken it down in your principles. And I'm curious to see how you've seen yourself growing in power in the way you define it over the years.
And I will say as well, like, the acronym isn't kind of a linear journey. You know, I'll always say we go in and out of power all the time. So when I think about presence in terms of my life, I was very present. So I was one of the tens of thousands of Nigerian children fostered to white families in the 1960s, 70s and 80s. I knew probably from the age of 5 that there was something. I learned very early on that as a girl, I had to be good. And as a black girl, I had to be a good black girl. So I learned very early on how to put my personality, my opinions, my thoughts, my feelings aside so that my foster family, whoever I was with, would keep me. Because the threat was always, I don't want to have a new mum and dad. I don't want to have a new mum and dad. And my birth parents, like many birth parents, made the best choices that they felt for me and my siblings, which was, how do we give our children the best educational opportunities? And for some parents, that's moving country, but it was a really big thing with Nigerian middle-class families, was the ability to be able to foster their children out. So I arrived with my fifth set of foster parents when I was 14 years old. I had 2 plastic bags of my belongings, and I always joke, I know you wouldn't like plastic. Like,
it's
I
okay.
always joke, like even I wouldn't like that now. It's like, if I was going back, I definitely would have chosen like a Hessian bamboo blend, something a little bit more biodegradable, but we didn't know in the 80s. We didn't know this stuff. And so for me, with that foster parent, she took me out. I didn't actually have, she just said to me, she goes, okay, Kemi, we need to take you shopping. Like, you don't have anything. I hadn't been homeless on the streets, but I had been sleeping on people's couches. Like, my friends at school, their parents were allowing me to kind of stay with them for a period of time. Yeah. So then when I eventually went into care and it became official, because a lot of that fostering wasn't official, it's more kind of like an underground network.
Right.
And she said, there are things that you need. And so we went shopping, and she said to me, we were in this particular department store in the UK, and she said, do you want pink underwear or do you want the multicoloured? She was like holding up the packets, and I sort of heard her but kind of didn't hear her. And then she said again, Kemi, I'm speaking to you, and I must have ignored her or something. And then she asked me again, she said, Kemi, I'm talking to you, I need you to answer. Do you want the pink underwear or the multicoloured? And I don't think the shop slowed down for anybody else, but I just had this sense of, she's asking me to choose. Like, I'm actually going to get a say in something that I want. Yeah. And I don't want the listeners to kind of be thinking, what colour did she choose? What colour underwear? I'm not a pink person. I chose the multicoloured ones. Yeah. But that for me was kind of my first moment of power. Now, I wouldn't have said that then.
Right.
But it was a moment of choice. And that for me goes back to responsibility. Like, we do get to choose in our lives. We may not like all of the options. Mm-hmm. We might have one bad choice and another bad choice, but we still get to choose one of those bad choices. Right. Like, that's where we take our agency back, if that's all we've got. So in that moment, that for me was this first kind of sense of power, because somebody asked me, what do you want? Right. And up until then, having no say around who my parents were going to be, how long I would be with them, constantly just trying to be good. That was my first moment of kind of being present to, whatever this feeling is, this is something. Yeah. And I don't want to let go of this feeling.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. That's so beautiful.
So that would be definitely, I think that would be my present story.
I love that. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times we don't realize that we're not giving ourselves choices. Yeah. A lot of times we're going through life, you're like, well, I got to do this, I got to vote this way, I got to do. But it's like, no. Yeah. You're a sovereign being. Yeah. You get to choose. Yeah, exactly. Now, people might disagree. People might bash you.
There will be consequences. You may
right.
have to let people go. You may be let go of. You may have to earn less money. There are lots of consequences of our choices. Yeah. But there are choices.
Yeah, I think you navigating that with presence is really powerful because we are the sum of our choices. Yes. At the end of the day. So I absolutely love that. And I'm glad you chose the multicolor. I like pink too, but I would have chosen multicolor. 100%. Okay, so as we go to the O.
To the O. I never, ever shared with people that I was fostered because I understood the pity that came towards me. Like, I'd get the tilt of the head. Yeah. Yeah. And, I've done a lot of work now, and especially within Brené's work that I facilitate, there's a big difference between pity and sympathy and empathy. But I always felt that it othered me. So I was already othered because I was the only black girl at school. So that was already an othering. Yeah. And then I was the foster kid. So that was already an othering. So it's kind of that thing of like, I need to feel as normal as everyone around me, even though it's obvious that I'm not. So I'm not going to add that into the mix. What I started to realize, especially as a coach, one of the reasons that I coach the way I do is because I, as a child, had to arrive in families, observe from the outside and see what is actually going on here. So what is being said and what is not being said. Right. How do I need to read between the lines? When I'm with clients, they might say something to me, I really want this. I really want this job. I've been working really hard. And I'll hear, but are you excited about it? Yeah. So I know that if I hadn't have had that experience as a child, I wouldn't have had that. So I started to own my story. I started to own it, and I learned different things because I have a great relationship with my birth. I was fostered, I wasn't adopted, so I've always had a relationship with my birth mother. Okay. And starting to learn a little bit more about my story and growing up and her stories and sort of thing, and just starting to integrate those things into who I was, knowing that for me, as part of my childhood experience, home is really important to me.
Yeah.
Home is like my sacred space. Not anyone gets to come into my home, right?
Right.
And I also know that if I move over into anxiety, or if I'm stressed or overwhelmed, I will default to trying to control my physical space, right? Now, I know that about myself. That is a true lived experience about me. And because I can take ownership of part of that's who I am and integrate that into myself, I can say to my husband, babe, and he's be like, okay, what's going on? Because he'll just see me kind of like, why have you got your shoes there? Why? Which is very different from homemaking, which I love, and just kind of pottering around.
Yeah.
And I learned a word from my friend in Atlanta the other day, dog daddling.
Oh.
No, that's not the word. No, I've said it wrong. But there's a word that's kind of like dawdling and sort of pottering around.
Oh,
and
doodling?
it's not doodling, it's like daggling or something.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, someone knows.
What someone said about me, that like, you don't have any idle time. You're always.
Okay. So you're not a potterer.
I'm always very intentional. I'm either self-caring, or I'm working, or I'm socializing.
Okay. See, I am intentional about my pottering. So do you know what pottering is? Pottering is like waking up in the morning and just kind of going, what do I feel to do today?
Yeah. I guess some people call it meandering.
Yeah, meandering, something like that. So for me, just kind of being able to integrate that. And then even in, as I've got older, I realized something I was doing about not taking ownership is that I am someone that is incredibly creative. There's a lot of things that I love to do. But what I started to do was I started to kind of stop doing things, or if I was going away on a retreat, or I was going away on a family holiday or friend's holiday, I would only take maybe my knitting. I wouldn't take my watercolouring and my journaling. Right. Because what people would start to say to me is there anything you don't do? And because of our need to belong, I would go, I can't ski and I can't add up and I would just give this list of all the things I couldn't do. And I suddenly realised, like, why are you doing that? Yeah. And I thought, because it's this idea of, is there anything you don't do, had me feel othered again, like you're separate, you're different from us. Yeah. So then for me, as I've got older, integration has also been, and taking ownership is like, I am someone who is really passionate about creating and making things, and I will no longer pretend that isn't the case. Right. So that's kind of, a story from kind of my childhood around owning my stories, and a story as I have got older and how I've been able to own that for myself too.
How do you think we do that? Why do you think that, like you say, you're owning who you are, but why do you think so many of us, and I do it still sometimes to this day, like, oh yeah, it's not big deal.
It's not. We diminish ourselves.
We diminish ourselves so much, especially as women, and especially as Black women. Yeah. So what do you think is the antidote to that? Because it's so ingrained in our culture, and ingrained what we see other women doing. So have you had something that's really helped you turn the key on, okay, I know this is not healthy for me, and then how do you move forward in a different way?
For me, it's always about practice. I'm a process person. I'm a practice person. I don't think there's any quick fix to anything. For me, I realised, especially around what you're saying around women diminishing other women, I just realised very early on that if I want to be a woman that feels elevated by other women, I have to become a woman that elevates other women. So a really big thing when I did my yoga teacher training in India, 30 odd years ago now, the Swami talked about ahimsa, no evil word, no evil thought, no evil doing. And I was an actor at that point, and within that culture there's a lot of gossip. Right. And yet a lot of the wounds that I've had in friendship have been around gossip and betrayal. So I had already felt it for myself. So then when I heard the Swami talk about that in the lecture, I knew for myself, I can keep complaining about my friends that gossip or betray or, not loyal, or I actually need to become that woman, and then I will attract women that have the same values when it comes to friendship. Yeah. And I decided that I would not speak about anybody. When I returned back to work, I was working as a chef and I was teaching yoga at the same time. I thought, I'm going to go to the kitchen next week and I'm not going to involve myself in any conversations that are gossiping about people, and I will not listen to any of those conversations. Koya, it was like I'd taken myself on a silent retreat, but I was working in a London restaurant. Wow. It was like I hardly spoke to anyone that week. I hardly had any conversations with anyone. But when I put my head on my pillow at the end of the night,
I bet it felt so good.
This is the person I want to be.
Yes,
This is the person I want to be. And then slowly, that is what happened, is I became a woman that didn't diminish other women, that elevated other women. I attracted other women that also wanted the same, felt the same, And I'm so incredibly grateful for the women that I have in my life now.
Oh, yeah. I love that. And that is so important. Yeah. That's one of my least favorite things around the circles that I'm in. I love people, but I definitely feel my energy sucked out of me when it's constantly complaining about, oh, she this and she this and he this. And I get it. You know, sometimes you got to release, especially when someone has harmed you. Yeah. But when it's every time you're diminishing someone else, literally anyone can be looked at as like a villain. Yeah,
100%, depending on the context.
Depending on the context. Yeah. Everyone makes mistakes. So you can take anyone's mistake and like make them a terrible person. Yeah. And it is the most exhausting thing.
It really is. And to do. And for me as well, what I learned, it was, I don't know if you know this quote about what Susan says about Sarah says more about Susan than it does about Sarah.
Yes.
That was just mind-blowing for me. And I had a friend, I say in inverted commas, and we connected over gossiping about other people. And I'd heard that quote, and as she was gossiping to me about this mutual friend, I suddenly just had this light bulb moment of, oh, you're doing this about me. Yeah. You're doing this about me with her when I'm not here. Yeah. And I was just like, I don't want any part of this. Yeah. And as you say about the venting, I believe that we can have containers. Like the girlfriends that I have now, I literally say, I need to vent. Yeah. I need 5 minutes. Yeah. And they're like, okay, go ahead. Yeah. And blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you good? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, so. Yeah. You know, but it doesn't become a conversation where we manifest into the world and negative energy about somebody else. For me now, it's, would I be willing to have that conversation with that person? If not, zip it.
Yeah, that's my thing when people come to me gossip because I hold space for everyone. That's fine. I always say, have you spoken to them? Yeah. Have you told them how they feel?
Yeah, exactly, because they don't know. You're making assumptions that they don't know. We have no idea what's going on.
I think that when it comes to ownership is so important. Own your story. Yeah. Own the fact that you don't know anyone else's story. And if you treat a person a certain way or change your view about a certain person because of what someone else has told you, that is your loss.
Yeah, and that was a beautiful thing that I learned in my yoga teacher training, which is when you meet someone, regardless of what anyone else has said about them, meet them for the first time. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I have to do that with my husband. Yeah. Because of all the things I've told myself about him the day before. I'm like, tomorrow morning I will meet him for the first time. Exactly. And it opens up a whole other thing.
Are you ready to dive into a world of radiant skin and natural beauty? Our sponsor, Pacifica Skincare, invites you to experience the transformative power of clean, vegan skincare products. Pacifica believes that beauty should be a reflection of your values. That's why they're committed to creating products that are good for your skin and the planet. From nourishing cleansers to rejuvenating serums and everything in between, Pacifica has your skincare needs covered. Say goodbye to the harsh chemicals and hello to glowing, healthy skin. Pacifica has innovative formulas and each product is carefully crafted using plant-based ingredients, botanical extracts, and powerful antioxidants, ensuring that you get the best nature has to offer. But Pacifica is more than just skincare. It's a celebration of self-expression and individuality with a wide range of products for every skin type and concern. Pacifica empowers you to embrace your unique beauty with confidence. If you're ready to elevate your skincare routine, visit pacificabeauty.com today to explore their collections and discover your new skincare essentials. Plus, enjoy free shipping on orders over 50 and use code KOYA15 for 15% off. Transform your skin and enhance your natural radiance with Pacifica. In relationship, that is so important. Since you went there, it is so important because I was just sharing with you before we started filming about, you know, having disagreements but you literally have to wake up every day with a clean slate. Yeah. Otherwise, you build this brick wall between you and your partner that will be impossible. Yeah, it does become impossible. And I think that's why a lot of people get divorced because you're building up these brick walls. You're not addressing anything and you're not realizing that this person's human and you're in their face all the time.
Relationships are work, you know. And actually just going back to the story thing, because one of the privileges of living on Australian land, and I live in Melbourne, which is known as the land of the Rawandjeri, is that they have such a strong culture around storytelling. So I am very blessed that I get to facilitate and coach on country in Australia on a hiking trail called the Larapinta Trail that goes through the heart of Australia near Uluru. And sometimes I'm doing that with an Indigenous guide and sometimes with a non-Indigenous guide. But I remember going with one Indigenous guide, and I love flowers and botanicals and nature and And I literally said to him, what is this bush? And he said, oh, this bush for my people. And he shared it with me. Literally, Koya, next door, like the next bush. I said, oh, and what is this one? He goes, it's not my story to tell.
Oh, wow.
That is not the bush from my people. That is not our shrub. That is not my story to tell.
Wow.
And we just walked past it. And so I just thought there's such power in that. This is why this is the oldest surviving culture on the planet. Because they have a level of integrity around what belongs to whom and who gets to share whom's story. So even now for me as a parent, I have a 20-year-old and 18-year-old. I'm very mindful now of what is my story to tell.
Right.
Whereas when your kids are younger, generally, it's kind of like, well, your whole life is their story because you're like, because I was at home with them for the first 7 years. So it's like, well, if I don't share your story, I don't have anything to say. Like, I fed you, I bathed you, I put you to bed, But now as they're older, I have to think about, is that my story to tell? Would they want me to say that about them if they were in this room? So, all of this work that we do, we have to be conscious and we have to then take ownership of our stories as part of that.
I think that's so powerful because a lot of parents are talking about, especially with social media, are they telling their children's stories and what is their social footprint? And I'm like, wow, I never really thought about those type of things.
And it's great because when the kids get old enough, a lot of parents are experiencing their children saying, I don't want to be in your film.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on the camera. I don't want to be filmed. And because children start to have their own consciousness. And I think as parents, if that's the case, like I didn't put my children on social media from the beginning. But, I think if parents then listen to their children, then that works.
Yeah.
If you're like, okay, great. It's like, thanks for the free content. Or do you know what? This generation is so savvy. There's probably kids going, I can be in your video, but it's going to cost you, Mum.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
hey,
right.
I'm
Entrepreneurship.
I'm going to be honest. I've already thought about like how much I will be paying my children from the time they were born for being in my content.
Being in your content.
Because as an entrepreneur, there are ways that you can pay your child and it's actually good for you business-wise. And it's also fair. And then when they're old enough to make a decision. They can make a decision, but they're still getting paid if they're in your content. So I think that's really important.
And it depends so much on the child.
Yeah. I think it's really important though, especially at the baby age, that there is a saving if there are in the content. I actually recommend people, as an entrepreneur, to put some money away from them, like have something you're paying. You can write it off.
I don't even know about this.
I know. Like I'm just reading because we're doing Planned Parenthood, but I'm just reading about all of the things. Like literally anyone in your family can be on payroll. You look at people like, I guess I don't want to say any names, but you look at some of the celebrity families and they're talking about how their children, before they even of age, they're billionaires and multimillionaires, but that's what they're doing.
See, this is what it's like when you have children before social media compared to the world of social media.
And there is such a light and dark with social media, and I just want to say this on the record. There's light and dark in the world, in everywhere. And social media is a mirror of that. So just because we can see more of the dark now than we ever saw before doesn't make it a bad place.
My social media just has flowers and nice people in it.
Mine has all the vegan recipes that I never make. And I told my God, I'm like, I'm going to at least make one recipe. But I love the vegan recipes. I love the DIYs. Like I love social media. But I have had to curate my feed, which I learned doing like, I think it was the chat. What was the chat room? Clubhouse.
Oh, yes.
I had to learn, like, you have to curate what you're seeing because the algorithm is listening to you.
Well, and also the thing, going back to this idea of ownership of stories as well, we get so much input of stories now. And so there's a discernment now that we need to have that we never need to have before. Like literally our brains are not evolutionary prepared to get stories from a bloke in China who's, I don't know, whatever he's doing, I don't know, painting watercolors, as well as the woman in Mexico who is dancing, as well as the person in England. It's like we would know what the person in the next village maybe was doing.
Right. Yeah, so it's
maybe
almost
if it was
overstimulating.
important, So there's so much input. It's like we don't even have the faculties yet to be able to really discern what is my story, what do I believe, what are the stories that are being made up and created around me, and what do I ingest? And I feel like that goes to wisdom, hey? Like, what am I being told from inside of me? And wisdom, it's such an interesting thing because I think it's so interesting. I know that, for you being a teacher and for me, there's a very distinct definition between being a teacher and being a coach, like in the training that I've had. And I've noticed it when I've been doing work in America now that I'm very much, told as a coach and I'm working out for myself, like what is that distinction for me?
Yeah.
And in terms of wisdom, because I've been meditating and doing yoga now for 30 years, I have a very, very trusted relationship with my inner voice. I do not question my instinct. But going back to process and practice, it's because I've had to process and practice that. I didn't come from that. I came from the world, or this family is going to tell you who you are, what you are worthy of, and what you get to do in the world. And I just went, okay, you know. So then when I discovered yoga in my early 20s, that was my practice of starting to listen to my inner voice. And also my body wisdom. You know, I can literally get an email, and my favorite emails, when someone sends me like an opportunity or an engagement, my favorite emails are where I see it, I have a full body yes. I put up the font like 74% in the email. It's always in green. 100% yes, and then back into kind of 12 font. We'll sort out the details later. And for me, that feels like a measure and a mark of me being in alignment with my life. The more of those emails that I get to send out, where I'm not in my head, does this work for this? It's like, this is just a yes, and we'll do the details later.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So for me, that is me trusting my inner wisdom. But it is something that has taken time. And I know that it's a practice, because I think we generally live in a world that are telling us not to live to our wisdom. Because if we did, so many structures and systems wouldn't work anymore. People would just be like, I'm out, see you later.
Exactly. And I feel like too, like when me, you know, growing up with religion, it's like you have to think this way, you have to do this way. But when I understood the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, I understood spirit as that inner wisdom. So even though it wasn't always explained to me like that, I remember that's how I took it. And so I was always spiritually guided, and now I say divinely guided. But then when I started yoga, much like you, that's when I had this daily relationship with that divine guidance every single day, because I was quiet enough. And my mind started to slow down. And then to reiterate what you said, I started to listen to my body wisdom. Like, why is my body feeling this way? Because I had an injury at the time when I really got deep into yoga. And I was like, okay, my body is not okay today. I'm going to go slow. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to move mindfully. And then it's getting better. I'm going to work it out. And I really learned that my body is my best friend. I just need to listen to it. And so I love that for your wisdom acronym, because I feel like when we tune in to our body wisdom, to our inner wisdom, to that divine guidance that we all have available, I feel like that's when our path, we get more of those full body yeses.
That's exactly right. And and also the idea of wisdom as well also speaks to trust. You know, that this idea of being able, I was actually talking to a friend earlier today, and I just said, I'm at a point in my life now where I trust the seeds that are sown, that are planted. I just trust them. I don't know where they're going. But if I feel it, I'm like, I'm a yes. I don't need to know the how. I don't need to know what the outcome is, but I can trust that something has been planted. So I'm going to go that way. And actually for me, my husband and I bought a farm in 2020 because I knew that I want to grow beauty in the world. That as the world, you know, the world has always been dark. It's just that now we have more access to the darkness in the world. But for me, it was like, what does my activism as a black woman look like right now in 2024? As a teenager in my youth, I was on the front lines. I was there with the pickets. I was there with everything. But now as a woman in midlife, I want to grow beauty. I want to be an elder where the younger generations want to spend time. And I want to spend time with those younger generations in a beautiful space. And that was me listening to my inner wisdom.
I love that.
Because I have no idea how to do a flower farm. Like, we're starting it. I've started planting. And I've been on the flower farming journey now for the last 4 years. But for me, this is my social justice work now.
I love that. I love that. I can't wait to see your garden.
Yeah, you will see it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so now as we continue, we're at E, right? And that stands for?
Equality.
And as you said, you didn't grow up feeling equal.
Not at all.
Yeah. So when did that transition? Do you have a idea of, was it just over time, or do you have a distinct moment when you started to think about yourself differently?
I'm not sure if there was there was quite a few different moments, but I'll share a story that I share in the book Power as well, because that was definitely one of the defining moments. So I had always been told as a young black girl or a young black person as I was getting older, when you're with black people are your people. Like they're your people. So I always had this sense of, oh, okay. So, you know, I would spend some holidays with my birth mother. So I'd be around aunties and some cousins and that sort of thing. But that wasn't my day-to-day life. My day-to-day life was living with white people. And my first foster family and my last foster family could not have loved me anymore if they tried.
Right.
And actually my last foster parents are like who my kids call grandma and grandpa. And I see them every year. But the foster parents in between, not so much. Right? And so for me, I'd had this kind of unconscious sense of, oh, so when I'm with black people, I'm going to feel like I belong. Like that's going to be enough. That's what's going to have me belong. So I remember I was actually, because I arrived with this foster family, my last foster family, and suddenly I had choices and I really wanted to get into drama. So I was doing these like Saturday morning drama classes. On a Saturday morning, and I travelled from where I lived in the UK. I didn't live in London, but I travelled on the train to London. I felt very independent. And I would go to drama school, and then I love people watching even to this day. It's why I love airports. And I would like call my foster mum and say, I'm going to be a little bit later home because I'm just going to people watch in Covent Garden, which is a beautiful space in London. And one day from my drama school classes, there was kind of an audition call for someone to be in a hip hop video, right? And I was the only black girl in that. And I think people just thought, well, there's only one black person, so obviously she should be the one that gets the audition for the hip hop video.
She's hip hop.
Yeah, she's the hip hop. And actually hip hop is not my favourite. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. And so I went for the audition. I got the audition, right? I was so excited on the train. I was like, this is it. I'm going to be with like black people my age. This is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So I arrive, we're in the green room. I can see there's some choreography going on and they're sort of like, everyone just wait in the green room, we'll come and get you. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is it. But we're not really talking because we're kind of waiting to be called by the director and stuff, and that's fine. Then they finish the choreography, the director comes over to speak to us and they're saying, this is what's going to happen today. And I asked a question and I just noticed that there was a group of people that had a reaction to what I had said. And I didn't know what they'd said, but I knew it was about me and I was pretty sure it wasn't nice.
Right.
So then we do the choreography, we do the dance, we do the filming, and that was it. We then have lunch and I go and sit with a group of people and I just start talking. And they're like, oh, you're a coconut. And I'd never heard that. And I said, oh, what does that mean? And they said, oh, you're black on the outside, you're white on the inside. And I just had this absolute, just internal devastation.
Yeah.
But I was meant to belong here.
Right.
So if I don't belong here and I don't belong there. And I remember going home on the train that night and I just had this sense of, I cannot keep turning myself inside out to try and belong in spaces and places where people don't think I'm worthy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be Kemi first. I'm going to double down on being who I am and have less focus on what other people need me to be so I can get a full sense of what it is to fit into places and spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That is powerful beyond measure. I know so many people have felt that because I know I've felt that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, and it's just like you can try to contort yourself.
That's right. And we do it so well.
But to be whatever
us.
it costs us your soul.
Yeah.
You know, when you contort yourself, you are not who you are.
Yeah.
You're this contorted version of yourself.
Yeah.
So when you want people to love you, they can't love you because they're loving the contortionist.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can't even get mad at them because
right.
you contorted.
Yeah, yeah.
You put yourself in this bind to where you're pretty much unrecognizable to yourself. And you're pretty much unrecognizable to them because they're like, we didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
Who are you really?
Yeah.
So I love that you came back to yourself in that way because I feel like it's going to be so powerful for so many people listening just to get back to themselves.
But this is the thing as well, because I think when I sort of look at it as well, this kind of idea of inequality, where I get really I got curious about myself of who I become in those spaces. So I would have this, and I know that you're really into mantras and affirmations, and so am I. My affirmation when I would walk into a room, my mantra, and you have to be mindful that most of these rooms were white rooms, was, you have nothing to fear here, I am nice. You have nothing to fear here, I am nice. You have nothing. That doesn't leave space for any other personality trait.
Right.
Nothing else. And it started getting, I was like, okay, people like me, because I had then taken on the story of angry black woman. So for me, anytime I had an opinion, I was an angry black woman. Right. So it's like, why am I going to sacrifice these spaces? These are the ones that I know. The other thing I learnt was how dangerous it is to believe that a group of people because they look like you are inherently your people.
Right. Yeah.
I just suddenly realised that was a story that I had made up for safety, but actually my lived experience of it was not actually how it turned out to be that way.
Right.
And what I now have is that I work, I live and work in Australia, and because of the work I do, I still spend my time predominantly in white spaces. But when I'm out in my own life, I have diverse friendships with diverse ethnicities. And the thing that actually matters the most to me with the people I spend time with is kindness.
Yeah.
I don't care what colour they are. I don't care how old they are. I don't care their class. I don't care how much money. I just want to spend time with kind people.
Ashe.
Yeah.
Yeah, kindness is priceless.
And I've learned to be kind. I definitely didn't grow up being kind. I grew up being scared because my priority was to survive.
Right.
So I was scared. And one of my foster mums, one of her affirmations was, people are out for themselves. Like, she just didn't have a positive experience of people or humanity.
Right.
And as a child, you just take on. And I have to say, one of the gifts of having, because I would go and see my birth mother in the holidays, I had 6 mums growing up.
Wow.
And there's something good about having a buffet table of motherhood.
Right.
Because then when I became a mum, I was like, what worked for me as a child?
Right.
And in some ways, that foster mum taught me more than any of the others in some ways, because I learned I did not want to be like that. I did not want to believe that people were inherently bad.
Right.
I did not want to believe that people were out for themselves, because I lived with her every day and I saw the sort of person that made her. And I didn't like how I felt around her being like that.
Are you ready to revolutionize your skincare routine with clean, ocean-inspired products? Say hello to Osea Malibu, the ultimate destination for luxurious, eco-conscious skincare. Osea Malibu gives the power of nature to nourish and heal your skin. Their products are carefully crafted using organic, sustainably sourced ingredients from the sea, giving you a radiant glow while protecting the planet. Say goodbye to harsh chemicals and hello to glowing, healthy skin with Osea's wide range of products. From cleansers and moisturizers to serums and masks, Osea has everything you need for your complete skincare routine. It's not just about what's in their products, it's also about what's not. Osea is committed to clean beauty, meaning their formulas are free of toxins, synthetic fragrances, and animal cruelty. Whether you're dealing with dryness, acne, or just want to pamper your skin, Osea has a solution for you. Experience the transformative power of sea-inspired skincare with Osea Malibu. Ready to elevate your skincare game? Visit OseaMalibu.com and use code KOYA10 today to explore their collections and discover your new skincare essentials.
Right. Yeah. So what kind of helped you get away from that, even though you were kind of engulfed in it for a period of time?
I think everyone remembers the first personal development book they read. So that would probably be the other thing. So I was 18 years old. So I was at drama school at this point. And I read The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. Now, I don't know if that book would translate now in 2024, so I'm not necessarily recommending it.
Right.
But that was the first time that I had had any inkling or sign or message that you get to have a say in your own life. Before then, it was you get what you're given. You do the best with what you can. The hand that you're dealt? That's it.
Right.
That was what I lived. Like, oh, well, this is it, and, whatever. And I've landed with these foster parents, so that's great. But the thought of actually crafting, directing, manifesting, attracting, working to build a life that is actually intentional, I had never heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning for me. That was like, that is what I want.
Yeah.
Because I've had enough of people telling me what my life should be and who I can be. I wonder what it's like to actually decide for myself.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's better than even wanting the success of someone else.
Yeah.
Actually creating what you feel like success.
And I wasn't even, and it's funny because the fourth book I'm writing, like I was writing this morning, is about success, right? How do we create success on our own terms?
Oh, I love that.
But for me, I'll be honest, I wasn't even in success.
Yeah.
Like, I was still in understanding that I didn't have to survive anymore and that I could move into thriving. So then what does that look like?
Yeah.
And obviously for many I have a few friends that were foster kids, it is always owning your home. Having a home that no one can take you away from.
Right.
Like, that is what thriving will look like for me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And when did you become a homeowner?
Well, I became a homeowner. Now, I could get emotional now.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a safe space.
I didn't have I didn't have a relationship with my Nigerian grandparents, but I had a relationship with my last foster mum's mum, and she became incredibly sick at the time that I was with them. So I must have been with them for a few years. One of the things about being a foster kid, it's kind of hard to orientate. Oh, people will say, oh, where were you in 1981? And I have to think, what foster parent was I with? Like, I always have to think, who was I with? Who were my parents? And you don't have the same family members telling you stories about yourself growing up.
Right.
I used to think it's because I didn't have a good memory.
Right.
And then I remember when I married my husband, and he has a very intact, stable family, and they were chatting at the dinner table. Do you remember when you were 7 and, you know, you put your shoe on and it didn't fit and there was a mouse in there and blah, blah, and everyone's laughing. And I suddenly realised that's why I don't remember parts of my childhood, because I don't have the family narrative that goes on every single time.
Right.
You know? But she was sick and she had a long enough time to write a will. She had 2 grandchildren, biological grandchildren, and there was me. And she included me in her will. And she said, I want to leave enough money for Kemi that she has the beginning of a deposit for her own home. And that is the only thing she's allowed to spend it on, because I need to know that she has her own home.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah. And then I very luckily went to drama school, got a commercial job, and I don't know if you like to be an actor and to get a commercial for anyone that doesn't know. Yeah, that is. I mean, obviously we all want like the deep, meaningful, profound roles.
Yeah.
But also give me a Maltesers commercial. I'm happy.
Hey.
Because the royalties can get you your first home. And that was what kind of happened for me. I had quite a few TV and commercial jobs. And then with that beginning of a deposit, I then managed to have my own home. But the trauma was still there. I bought my flat, or I had a mortgage. I would walk home, I'd go out for the day or go to work, and I would come home and my mantra was, please don't let it have been burnt down. Please don't let it have been burnt down. Because there was a part of me that was still, this is too good to be true.
Right.
Because my experience was when I settled with a family and felt like I'm good, I'm safe here, I'm not going to get moved on, this is good, I'd get moved on. So then I started to create the story of, if anything is too good to be true, it actually is, and it's all going to fall apart. So then that was part of my journey. And even now with buying our farm, there was something happening in the process of the sale going through. And I said something to my husband and he said, are you going to sabotage this? And he said, this is real.
Right.
You have worked for this. You deserve this. We have earned this. This is good and this is true.
Right.
And I was like, it's amazing. The work is never ending.
Right. It is never ending. It's so true.
But then I always say, we'll sort of move on to responsibility maybe. But for me, once you start the work, there's no going back. Yeah. You can't then put your head back in the sand and go, and just live life by default. It's like once you start a personal development journey, even though it can be more challenging than living in denial or living by default or doing what other people tell you to do, the gifts of living in the world as yourself are priceless.
Priceless. I agree. And it's beautiful that you met your fear there. Because even though you had this for your own flat, once you got it, even though you had this narrative, you kept doing it. Someone you could have checked out. You'd be like, no,
100%. I could have burnt it down myself. Yeah. And actually, I remember hearing a story because I pulled aside. I was driving, and it was a story about foster children, and it was a boy who was 19 who had been in 100 foster homes. Wow. And he had burnt down the last 10. And I remember just sobbing. I had to pull over because I knew why. I do not have that in me, but I understood him. Right. I understood what it is when you test, but do you love me? But do you love me? But do you love me? Do you love me if I burn your house down? And the reality is that most people are, no, I'm not going to love you.
Yeah,
do
would
that.
be really
you know
pissed.
what I mean? That'd be really hard, right?
Yeah.
But I
test me some other type of way. Just don't burn my house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Do something else, like stay out beyond curfew or something.
Let's
just keep it light.
Yeah.
But
break a dish or something. Don't burn the house.
I completely understood why he did it, and I completely understood that sabotage of this is too good to be true for me, so I have to demolish it.
Yeah. Oh, that just made me think of some things that we do unconsciously to self-sabotage, especially when we get the good job or we get the good relationship.
That we've worked so hard for.
But our trauma. like you said, can keep us in the state of lack that we unconsciously sabotage.
That's right.
Our next level of evolution. It happens so often.
So often. And I will often, like, clients will say, will this voice ever go? Will this inner critic ever go? And I know that people have different responses to this, but I say, let's pretend it won't.
Yeah.
I said, but growth comes from knowing the voice and knowing that it's not you, and literally being able to go, oh, I'm about to sabotage myself now.
Yeah.
Because that's what I do when anything gets too good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like to just name it and own it and speak it, and you're less likely to do it. Exactly. For me, I used to believe that voice, but now I'm just like, oh, that's what I do when I'm tired or when I'm overwhelmed, or, you know, that's where I'll push, or I'll, you know, I had to learn in my relationship with my husband that I used to test him, you know, and I used to have, if he hurt me because I grew up as a child, don't have feeling, I would just, what do they call it? Stonewalling. It's one of the worst things in relationships, to just cut off your emotion. But I just knew, I don't know if you're actually going to be around for me. I know you said you were going to be, but my lived experience is people will say they're going to be around for you, and then they're not. So then I had to learn through our marriage as well, and obviously he's had his own lessons to learn through our marriage, of like, actually, that is not the way to go. The way to go is for me to say to him, when you're late for work, I know you're just late to come home from, when you're late in work, and you don't text me to tell me that you're going to be late, I go into this whole spiral that this was all too good to be true, and maybe you're never coming back. And the way then that I'm going to deal with that is I'm going to cut off from you, and maybe I won't speak for you for 2 days, right?
Yeah.
And then he'll go, babe, I'm not going anywhere. And we just hug, and I'm like, oh, I'm good now.
Oh, yeah. You just needed that confirmation.
Needed to say it. Yeah, but also I needed to own it for myself and not project it onto him.
Right.
To just kind of go, what is happening to me? This is the presence bit again. What is happening? Because actually what's happened is he is late, and my husband's a lawyer, and he does environmental work and human rights work. He's often in court. He cannot text me to say, I'm like, court's run over. He just cannot do that. Yeah. So, but to me, I'm making up all of these stories around what it means. So then for me to work out what is going on for me when I know this man is out in the world doing really good work, and you're making him like the worst person that was ever born onto the planet. Like, there's a mismatch between the reality and what is going on for you.
Right.
So for me, like, having shown up in those spaces as unequal, my work has now been, and Brené talks about hustling for our worth, right? And now what I do, I never hustle for my worth anymore. I don't hustle for my worth to be in rooms. If I walk into a room and I feel that sense of, because I know how to do it, I'll leave the room. Yeah. Because that's what power feels like to me now. Just, and not with my finger up, not with any not with anything, just like, this is not my room.
Yeah.
I just want to be in rooms where I don't have to prove that I'm worthy to be here.
Yeah, and that's a lot. That's a lot. I feel like we're coming, and I think you mentioned it before, we're coming into an age where the younger generation, they're really teaching us what inclusivity is like. I think that's, can you speak a little bit more on that?
I would love
because
to.
I think that is so profound and it's so true.
So I have, my 18-year-old is non-binary. And when they said to us they're queer, they're non-binary, and when they said that, we're like, yep, fine, whatever, that's great. But I have, you know, fellow parents of my generation. So I turned 50 this year, so I have lots of parents of that age who have teenage kids, right? Yeah. And they will say to me, oh, but I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. And I'd say to them, please don't get caught up on understanding. Yeah. We come from a generation where they meant a group of people, right? So it's never going to make sense, right? If you choose. But if you focus on understanding, you are going to miss your child feeling like you respect them. And someone else said to me, but what if they change their mind in a year? They're teenagers. They're just trying on things. Exactly. And what if they change their mind in a year? What if they go back to their original pronouns? And? Yeah. Then you'll just flip back. Yeah. Like, I just think this generation of young people want the world to be so much more inclusive than we have ever experienced it before. And if we don't get on board with the language that they are trying to teach us, and we just go, oh, it's too hard, it's too hard. It's too hard, really? It's too hard to create a world where more people feel safe and have a voice and are included. It's too hard. I just think sometimes, there's an Aussie saying which is kind of like, pull your head in. Pull your head in, like pull your head in. And that's what I think sometimes, like, look at the bigger picture. Right. You know, and I also had to say to my young child as well, who is just very like, this is the right way. And I said, you need to give us grace. Yeah. You need to give us grace. We are trying our hardest. Sometimes we will get it wrong. but we need you to know that we love you, we respect you, we get it 100%, we are on board, and sometimes we're going to get it wrong because we've only known you with a particular pronoun for 13 years.
Right.
So you have to give us the grace, but it's going to take us a little bit of time to switch. You
Yeah.
know? And they were great. They were just like, you know what, Mum, the easiest way is to forget the pronouns and just use my name. And now, and I feel like I have a little bit of kudos with some of my kids' friends because I've learned to ask them their pronouns. I'll go,
Right.
hi, I'm Kemi, da, da, da. What are your pronouns?
Yeah.
You know, and you can just see for them, they just feel that sense of respect and that they're seen. And generally when I'm now in the rooms as a 50-year-old with these 17, 18, 19, 25-year-olds, I rarely speak.
Yeah.
It feels like such a privilege to be in these rooms. Like, I remember being a teenager and to have an older person around, it kind of felt like your space and your safety was invaded and blah,
Yeah.
blah. So when these young people have a sense that this older person, we trust you enough to, and I think it's because I don't speak, to be honest.
Right.
I reckon if I was there going, let me just tell you how it was in my day, I would be
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
But I think because I'm obviously one of the gifts of being a coach is I'm likely to be more curious.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Tell me about that. And they're like, did you know this? And did you know that? I'm like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, and just that thing of like, they have so much to teach us if we let them. We're missing out if we think, well, I am older and I know better. Yes. We know better for the world that we lived in. We do not know better for the world that they are living in.
Ashe. It's so true. Working with kids, like my whole life, I love working. My dad's like, you're going to be a teacher. I was like, I don't want to be a teacher, but I'm a teacher because I love people and I love sharing knowledge. So one thing I learned with working with children all the way up into the teens is that they do want to share.
Yeah. Oh, they've got a lot.
But if they feel like you're going to judge them, ridicule them or question them, they're not talking. Yeah. So the fact that you're not talking, you're allowing them to express, that really brings out like all of them. Yeah, that's right. And I think that's such an important thing in parenting and holding space for the younger generation. Yeah. Let them talk. Let them express without judgment. Yeah. Literally, ask them questions. Yeah. Also, you pretty much have to become a coach. Yeah, you know?
In some ways, exactly.
You just need to ask them questions to see where they're going, what they're
understand
thinking about.
who they are. So I know that there's a lot of parents, and it's kind of like a secret parent kind of trick. Yeah. So when you're doing the school run and stuff like that, you're just listening. Yeah. And you just don't add your opinion, you hear the dynamics between friendships. Yeah. You hear what your child believes and thinks about certain things. Like to just be in that space with them, but not feel that we have to power over them. Right. So they're back to power, don't have to power, but power with them and just kind of be an observer. I have learned so many things about my children by actually asking them what they think about things. So global things will happen and I don't go, well, I think, and these are, I'm like, what do you think? Yeah. And they're like, and I'm like, wow, I wasn't even that deep down. Right. Said, no, I have to think about what you said and I'll come back to you what I think.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so beautiful. Yeah. I think that's so beautiful. And I think it's so wonderful that your child gets this experience where they can be themselves.
But it's equality again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's being in that space with them as equals that have something to teach me. I don't just have something to teach them.
Yeah. Exactly. And I guess that takes us to responsibility.
There we go. You know? Responsibility.
Yeah. So how do you feel like this responsibility, because you've taken radical responsibility for your life, you've even taken responsibility in holding space in your children's life and also the people that you coach. So what does that really mean to you when you really look at it?
Responsibility for me is, and look, light and dark, right? Yeah. So I definitely had that survival thing of no one is coming to save you. Yeah. As a young black girl, I was read fairy stories where none of the princesses looked like me. So there was no prince coming to save me. Right. So I learned very early on, you're on your own. Yeah. Right? And because I didn't have a consistent family network either, I also had a sense of you're on your own. And then reading that book, it was kind of, then it flipped from the shadow survival, you are on your own, to you know how to look after yourself. And now you're on your own because you get to create the life that you need. Now, the shadow side of that was actually my second book is The Gift of Asking, because then I actually created this kind of idea of I'm on my own. No one else can help me. I mustn't ask for help. I mustn't ask for support. That is weakness. Then I'm vulnerable. Then I can get hurt. You know, so that's the dark side of that as well. But responsibility for me now is 100% asking for what I need and want. Yeah. Because we are not meant to do life on our own. We all need support. We all need help. And so for me, responsibility is understanding who I am, asking for what I need, knowing that no one is coming to save me, But also as well, my first foster parents and my last foster parents were really, really committed to community.
Right.
So for me as well, and I've raised my kids within communities and they've created their own communities, and I within my work create communities. But for me, it's like responsibility now as well has branched out into this idea of not just me being responsible for myself, but me being able and having the resources and the responsibility to create community for and with other people.
Right.
You know, that is what I want to do with my power. So even with the flower farm, for me, there's an aspect of that is around social justice. So this idea that only people with certain privileges get beauty, as opposed to no, when people are in trauma, when people are healing, and when people are disadvantaged or marginalized, that is when we need beauty.
Yeah.
So how does that look like? How do I create something with the resources that I have that creates beauty for other people? And that for me is what power and responsibility looks like at this part of my life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think we all need that. And one of the questions that I like to ask at the end of podcasts are, if this was Kemi's world, what would it look like?
Oh, flowers.
Flowers.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Actually, and really big trees. And I tell you, the first thing I noticed in Atlanta was the beautiful trees.
Yeah.
And the oaks and the pines. Oh my gosh. So everyone would have access to land. And it doesn't have to be a lot.
Right.
But and even the book I'm writing now is looking at success through the lens of nature. Mother Earth gave us a lot of the answers.
Yeah.
And I believe that the more access people have to land and to beauty and to nature, there's a level of power that comes from understanding that we are nature connected to nature. And I think that's all I'm going to say about that, because if I go to any more detail, it's kind of like there are so many structures and systems in place that we kind of have to live within right now.
Yeah.
And we can sort of step off the path as much as we can. And obviously everyone is at different places and different people's truths are true, right? But I think if there was more of a distribution of land, I think that could help. I think going back, this idea of forward progress is always best when we know how much disconnection and depression and ill health and loneliness there is in the world. There is something about villages and land and growing food and people knowing that their individual gifts are what build community. I don't need you to do all the things, because actually that person over there builds the houses, and that person there does the gardening, and that person makes the beautiful tea, and that person, that when we can create these kind of ideas of community, whatever that looks like, that would be a world that I would want. Multi-generational, so you've got the young people teaching the elders.
Yes.
The elders are there as this anchor, as a sense of growth and permanence for the younger people. I think going back to those kind of what we call like the older systems, or this idea, I think, no, there was something there. It's why it worked for so long. Faster isn't always better.
I love your world.
Isn't always better. You like my world? Do you want to come and live in it? Awesome.
Yes. I think, like you said, I don't think I've ever heard that before, but it's like everyone having land and the connection to nature. I believe nature is our greatest teacher.
Yeah.
So even seeing how flowers grow, seeing how food grows, like the cycle of life.
The cycle of life.
It is healing.
It is healing.
Yeah,
that's right.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be down to hang out in your world.
Beautiful.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you, and I can't wait. We're going to keep hanging out, so we're going to hang out. We're going to do some stuff off the record. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have not already, please leave a review. Let us know your greatest takeaways. If you haven't gotten a copy of her book, Power, already, grab a copy everywhere books are sold.
Yep.
And until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world one day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.
Beautiful.